Well, hello, good evening, and welcome to episode 85 of Fracking Nightmare. Now, this is the first update of April 2016, and regular viewers of Fracking Nightmare will recall that back in 2014, after the Barton Moss campaign, more of which later, we moved to Crawberry Hill in East Yorkshire, where due to the Humberside police refusing to facilitate anything that resembled peaceful protest, the protectors were forced to take some fairly dramatic action and ended up building a castle in front of Rathlin's well site. Well, I was one of the named defendants in that eviction hearing, where we went to London with the sole purpose of trying to get the hearing moved to Hull, and also an adjournment because the eviction hearing had been called within 72 hours of posting the notices. Well, Rathlin Energy have been pursuing me for some £35,000 in court costs, plus the mounting interest, and I have challenged that claim. And at last, I now have a date of sort where I can air my views and attempt to try to get the costs set aside. So later this month, David Montague-Smith, who is the chairman of Rathlin Energy, and the landowner, Philip Ellerington, and as I shall explain in court, at no point have I caused, unless Philip Ellerington chooses to challenge and suggest otherwise, at no point did I or any of the other named defendants cause Philip Ellerington any harm or loss. So this is Rathlin Energy. In fact, it's David Montague-Smith, the chairman, really pursuing me. Now, up until I think it was 1985, there was a crime of barratry in the UK. It's no longer a crime, but barratry is primarily where a corporation effectively maliciously pursues someone to try to shut them down. In the US, this is called a SLAP, a strategic lawsuit against public participation. Well, the hearing for me to present my case to set aside the court costs will be at the Royal Courts of Justice at the Rolls Building, Fetter Lane in London. And the nearest tube station is Chancery Lane. But like I said, I can't give you an exact date because the hearing will be heard on one of these dates, Wednesday 27th, Thursday 28th, or Friday the 29th of April. And the only way I can find out when, or anybody else can find out when, is by going to the justice.gov.uk website that you see at the bottom of the screen there, and wait for the case to be posted. And of course, the conspiracy theorists amongst the viewing audience would perhaps quite understandably make the observation that this is a deliberate attempt to try to give the corporatocracy the advantage and prevent either supporters or even witnesses from participating in the hearing. So I will keep you posted. But anybody who is interested and wishes to see the proceedings as they unfold at the Royal Courts of Justice, please make a note of those dates in your diary. And sadly, in the worst case scenario, we won't be able to know specifically when the hearing will be until 2 o'clock in the afternoon of the previous day. Well, if we thought that we had issues in the UK, they certainly pale into insignificance compared to what the residents of Porter Ranch in California have had to endure over the previous 5 months now. You regular viewers will know that we've had a number of shows where Susan Gorman-Chang, a resident of Porter Ranch, has joined us to give an update. And I'm very pleased to say that Susan has joined us again this evening. Susan, welcome back to Fracking Nightmare.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, and thank you for covering this.
Well, hey, listen, somebody has to, because the mainstream media don't seem to be too interested. Now, I've noticed that the backdrop there, in the past, we were in sort of fairly empty rooms. We had a bit of a problem with the sound because there wasn't too much furniture in the rooms because you were in temporary accommodation. But
Yes.
this is looking a little bit more permanent.
Yes. We're back home, back in my little office area. We took Saturday and Sunday to move back home. And this is Monday. I took the day off. We're still sort of putting things back where they belong. But still have a lot of anxiety and a lot of unanswered questions. Our lease was up on the house, and so we came back.
So this is the lease was up, and Southern California Gas had basically stated that they weren't prepared to finance any extended relocation.
Correct. Now, they've been taken to court, and in the next few days, the courts may or may not make a decision about that. So, because what's happening is the Los Angeles County Health Department came in and tested 100 homes. They did some swabs.
How were those 100 homes selected, Susan?
I got an email from Porter Ranch Neighborhood Council, and we volunteered. I think they were volunteers, but I think they actually also tried to do sort of geographic dispersion of houses so they could get a good sample of, different locations within Porter Ranch. I don't know the specifics of that, but hopefully they covered a broad enough area so they could really understand what was going on with some of the air quality issues. And so, again, they did the swab test on one day and then left a group of monitors in our house for about 24 hours. And they came back and got those Saturdays. Now, those test results will be given to us individually after 2 weeks. And then in 4 weeks, they're going to give us, the public, the sample of all 100 homes and what they came up with that. So it's not a situation that we're back, but we don't have the results yet. So a little disconcerting.
Now, but I know that you took some pretty drastic action, and rightly so, of course, and we had discussed this previously. But you didn't just walk back into your home as you left it, did you?
No, we did not. Monday through Thursday of this past week, we hired a professional firm who comes in after either sort of chemical disasters or fire disasters, hired by insurance companies that come in and wipe down every surface, shampoo every carpet, every upholstery, do giant air filters, suck everything out of the air vents, change your air vents, wipe even the ceilings, the floors, every possible surface, and have everything dry clean, the drapes, any valances, anything like that. And so, yeah, we really had it thoroughly cleaned. And we'd had that done once before because we had some smoke damage from a fire back in 2008 where the hills behind us were on fire, but our house didn't catch on fire. And that was paid for by our property insurance because that was a fire. At this point, there's no insurance to pay for what, we had cleaned up here because it was not a natural disaster. It was an unnatural disaster. And that'll be part of our lawsuit, and we hope to recoup that from SoCal Gas because, we would not have moved in because there still could have been particulate matter, chemicals that had adhered to the surfaces. So we thought it was worth it to front that money to be safe.
Okay, but now this wasn't an insignificant sum of money, was it? Would you share with us how much that cost you?
$5,800.
$5,800. So that's, give or take, that's roughly about £4,000.
Yeah.
In sterling.
Yeah.
That's not insignificant. Now, obviously, you, I'm assuming, have the good fortune to have that amount of cash readily available. But I'm sure that not everybody is in that situation.
No. Most people really don't. And I think some people have moved back into their homes or maybe trying to do some of the cleaning themselves. But to really be safe, I think it needs a professional job with professional people, professional strength, steam cleaning. And, I wouldn't even have the equipment to get everything out of the vents, all the air vents for the heating and the cooling. And so it doesn't seem to be going very smoothly, I should say.
Let me ask you a question, Susan. Would you have moved back had you not had the available financial resources to literally steam clean the whole property.
No, I would have not. I wouldn't want to take that risk. I really wouldn't.
But the problem is that, of course, the way things are right now, with Southern California Gas refusing to extend their responsibility for rental properties, so people are literally caught between a rock and a hard place, aren't they? Because if they're not going to get any financial support to continue the rental, and they're not going to get any financial support anywhere to clean the property, so they really are.
Hazard. Exactly. Yeah. It's a health hazard because so that's why it's, it went actually to the appellate court, and I called a few minutes before we got on here, and they said, well, it's not scheduled for today. So, and it's just very difficult because hotels start to fill up. This is April. We're starting to get into spring break season to, coming into tourist season, and there's not a lot of hotels and rentals anyway. And to try to get one at the drop of a hat, if they suddenly make this decision, it's just very, very, very difficult. It's been this way all along. We were lucky enough to have a house lease that was through the beginning of April, but some people were at hotels, and from one week to the next, they would. I think they said as soon as SS number 25 was plugged, then you've got to get out of your hotel in 48 hours, and it's been week by week. It's like, okay, they have to sue. And then they get another week extension. Then they sue again, and they get a 2-more-week extension. It's just been very, very stressful and very difficult for people.
And all the time, somebody's got to front the costs of the legal action.
Right. And then the other thing is, Friday, we moved back in Saturday. Friday, there were smells of gas again, which is mercaptan, the odorant added to the gas. And the LA County Health Department was up here doing sampling and noted it. And so I asked the county supervisor, staff person, I said, why are we still smelling gas? If they're saying they plugged up SS25, why are we still smelling gas? And people were calling in all over the place, okay? And SoCal Gas said, well, this is what they said. It was a burp. It was a burp of gas because we think maybe there's some methane left in the soil from SS number 25. And that to me is totally ridiculous. It's like, okay, so how long is it going to be burping? And to me, that's a leak, okay? If it's still coming out from the ground, that's still a leak.
Well, and of course, SoCal, I must confess off the top of my head, I don't know who they've got as their PR consultancy, but it wouldn't surprise me at all if it's related to Hill and Knowlton. Of course, Hill and Knowlton are the absolute specialists in lies, deceit, and obfuscation. Of course, it's Hill and Knowlton who dreamed up the scheme of having the CEOs of the tobacco companies lined up before the Congressional Committee and all state that they had not seen any evidence to support the claim that smoking contributed to lung cancer. So to work for these kind of organizations, you have to have no soul. Basically, it's not only sold, it's gifted. And so, it wouldn't surprise me that the likes of Hill and Knowlton have got their most creative, perversely creative minds, coming up with explanations for anything that now arises, just to try and sort of, dissipate any further potential litigation.
Oh, exactly. It's like, what is a burp? It's a technical term or what? I mean, that's just crazy.
Well, we have a similar technical term in the UK. It's a technical term that I don't think has made it across to the US, but it's a technical term that we would use in response to something like that, and that technical term is bollocks.
Yeah.
Yeah, because that's pretty much what it is. Now, I want to just put in perspective for people the magnitude of this disaster, because it hasn't really penetrated the media in the US, and certainly not in any way in Europe. In fact, I could pretty much guarantee that I could, although it's fairly late at night here, but I could walk out of the studio here and I could pretty much guarantee that if I asked 100 people what Porter Ranch meant to them, I'd be pretty amazed if any one of those random people had any clue as to what I was talking about. I mean, that's the degree of ignorance amongst the general population. And that's primarily because the media has literally limited this to, a couple of column inches buried deep in the paper. But one of the reasons that, I thought it was appropriate that, we got you back on tonight was because of this article that appeared in the New York Times Magazine this weekend. And I think, you having had a quick scan of it before we came on air, we are both pretty much in agreement that this is quite possibly the most comprehensive mainstream media coverage that we've seen of the Porter Ranch disaster. And what we see here on screen is this is the opening page for this article, the invisible catastrophe. Over the course of 4 months, 97,100 metric tons of methane quietly leaked out of a single well into California's sky. Scientists and residents are still trying to figure out just how much damage was done. Now, I just want to put this into some perspective because I have some stats here. This is based on 96,000, 97,100. We're not going to argue about the odd thousand. It's a shed load of methane, that's for sure. So 96,000 metric tons of methane. And it says a powerful climate pollutant are estimated to have leaked between October 23rd and February 11th. Now, this is in CO2 terms, that is the same as 8 million metric tons of carbon dioxide. In terms of gasoline burned, it's the equivalent of 900 million gallons of gasoline being burned. And in terms of cost, which is really the least of the concerns, but the cost is estimated in terms of the gas that's just been leaching out into the atmosphere is $15 billion. Like I said, that's actually the least of the concerns, and the reality is that the potential cost to SoCal is certainly going to be significantly more than that. And then this is actually an extract from that article in the New York Times Magazine. And I would encourage people to actually download that article and just search for New York Times Magazine Invisible Catastrophe, and you will go straight to it. But this helps to put it in perspective. During the 4 months the leak lasted, 25 days longer than the BP oil spill in the Gulf of Mexico, the leak contributed roughly the same amount of warming as the greenhouse gas emissions produced by the entire country of Lebanon. If well SS-25 were a nation state, it would have contributed to global climate change at a rate exceeding that of Senegal, Laos, Lithuania, Estonia, Zimbabwe, Albania, Brunei, Slovenia, Nicaragua, Panama, Jamaica, Latvia, Georgia, Guinea, Equatorial Guinea, Costa Rica, Honduras, Tajikistan, Armenia, and Iceland. And it would rank just behind Mali. So Mali, by the way, is a massive landmass. Probably about the size of Texas. So, what we're talking about here is an order of magnitude. And, I'm not going to get into the whole climate change issue. Let's just focus on the sheer issue of the pollution. And, this is mega. All coming out of one small hole in the ground over a relatively short period of time. And, it's becoming very clear because, there are a number of articles that people can research for themselves just by punching in Porter Ranch gas leak. And it's very, very clear that the scientists have no clue about the long-term effects of this.
Yes. Yeah, we are the guinea pigs. We are the science experiment. There are no long-term studies of something of this magnitude, of people living this close, being exposed to it, children, people with compromised immune systems, elderly, all of us. Yeah, we're going to be the subject of articles, I'm sure, for years to come. Yeah, and again, SoCalGas just seems to be putting out there, we did indoor air testing just for methane, and they said it was clear. Of course, we are more concerned with the benzene, the toluene, the xylene, all the carcinogens that also came up out of those wells because those wells used to be oil wells. So it's not just the gas, it's all the chemicals that were underneath there as well that have come up. And we still have no list from SoCalGas of all the chemicals that have come out and what we've been exposed to.
Well, and the mercaptans. And I seem
that was the one that got everybody's attention because it really, you could smell it.
Yeah.
I mean, it really did some bad things to us, obviously. But there's also all the carcinogens that came up with it that have no smell, you know? And yeah, it's very disturbing. Now, UCLA was funded by 11th Hour. And before the health department did their 100 homes of testing, they tested 8 homes. Ours was one of those homes. And ours tested, let's see, we were within normal background levels of Los Angeles, okay, for benzene, toluene, and several other things. But 2 of the homes were above the level of safe benzene, and the residents were told not to go home. And so the question is, you know, why is it 2 homes test such high levels? What about the rest of the homes? What about the 8,000 other homes that aren't being tested? You know, I mean, there's so many unanswered questions. And 60% of the people that have moved back in still have the symptoms, the nosebleeds, the headaches, the dizziness, the nausea. And so obviously something's going on. We just don't know what we've been exposed to.
Well, and sadly, I mean, forgive the analogy, but it's like, you know, people realizing that they're in a gas chamber and doing the smart thing and leaving. But now, basically, because they've been told that the well's capped, it's stopped leaking, apart from the occasional burp, that it's okay to go home. And it's like walking back into the gas chamber, actually not knowing whether the gas is still leaching. And like you say, you know, I'm using the term gas as a collective because of everything that's incorporated in that. And as you say, the symptoms, and sadly, this is exactly what we predicted when we last spoke, because I think we last spoke almost immediately after the announcement that the well had been capped. And I said, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to work out that, you know, 97,000 tons of this stuff percolating into the atmosphere isn't just going to dissipate in the proverbial heartbeat. Right. And the elements that are heavier than air are going to settle because there hasn't been as much movement as normal. You know, people aren't moving around the houses, so everything gets an opportunity to settle. And so invariably, those people who haven't had either the resources or the wherewithal to actually engage the cleaning companies to come and literally fumigate their properties from top to bottom are walking straight back into that gas chamber.
Right. It's so disturbing. And again, you know, people trust when they hear SoCalGas or they hear the health department say it's safe to move back in, they take them at their word, and it's tragic. The other thing is, the 2 of the 8 homes that tested high in the benzene had the filters that SoCalGas gave them that made everybody feel safe. And early on, I had asked a doctor from the Los Angeles County Health Department, do these filters, I understand they can filter out the smell of mercaptan. Can they filter out benzene? And he said to me, I'm really not convinced they can. But did that word get out? No. So there's people with these filters, and some people never left because SoCalGas gave them these filters for their homes, and they were still exposed. You know, I mean, it's just criminal the way this has all come down, the lack of information. You know, you really have to dig for it. And again, people's sort of human nature to trust when an authority figure tells you it's okay. It's like a perfect storm.
Well, and sadly, I mean, that's part of people's conditioning as well, that when somebody in authority tells you it's safe, well, it must be safe.
Right,
you know?
right.
And this is, I mean, it's a classic part of social conditioning, you know, which sort of just shuts down people's own natural curiosity, or in this case, outright common sense.
Yes, yeah.
You know, and I got another quote here. And this is, you'll tell me what EDF, because I know that's not Electricité de France. That's an
Environmental Defense Fund.
That's it, the Environmental Defense Fund. Okay, and this is a quote from Tim O'Connor, who is director of California Oil and Gas. He says it was a mega leak, one of the biggest ever recorded. And the Environmental Defence Fund estimates that the amount of methane leaked had the same 20-year climate impact as burning nearly 1 billion gallons of gasoline. Well, that's what we saw, 900 million gallons. I mean, this is, and I heard or read another quote where a particular environmentalist said, okay, it's not as bad as Fukushima, but it's a lot worse than the BP Deepwater Horizon disaster. And so, the world heard about Fukushima, the world heard about the BP Deepwater Horizon disaster, but nobody outside of Porter Ranch or, probably the LA suburbs, with a few exceptions amongst perhaps those who are more environmentally aware, few people have even heard of this. And yet the impact, as we're discussing here, is quite probably going to be felt for a long, long time to come. I mean, it really wouldn't surprise me, and I doubt very much whether the corporations are going to, particularly SoCal, are going to be doing the monitoring, but the youth, I mean, the young people, because we know it's the young and the elderly, who are most susceptible to these significant changes in their environment. And, the elderly, they're going to pass maybe sooner than they might have otherwise passed. But the children, those who are literally between, even the fetus, through to 18-year-olds, as they go through life, this exposure to this magnitude of contamination in that area is, in my opinion, likely to manifest in very, very significant negative health issues.
Oh, yeah. Cancer clusters, we've already had, people with their asthma's worsening and all of their conditions are worsening. A lot of pulmonary issues. It's just, someone called it a slow-moving tsunami.
Well, and then, exactly. And then, of course, what's going to come down the pipe next is that health insurance companies are going to have a box on the form that says, "Did you ever live in Porter's Ranch?"
Yeah.
And if you lived in Porter Ranch, if you've ever lived in Porter Ranch, then the premiums are going to go sky high, or people are not going to be able to get healthcare insurance. Period.
Yeah. I mean, it has so many ramifications, and I just don't understand that there's not more media coverage on it. I don't understand why. It's like the BP in the hills behind us. It's the invisible BP. I mean, people could see the oil slick, and with the FLIR camera, they could see the gas, but still, it just hasn't garnered the outrage, and I don't understand that. I really don't.
Truly staggering. Susan, stay with us. We're going to take a short break, but this is such an important subject. I'd like to give it a little bit more time tonight. So we'll take a short break, and we'll be back with Susan Gorman-Chang from Porter Ranch after this.
The Alternative View Conference presents AV7 Humanity Rising. Speakers include Ian R. Crane, Thomas Sheridan, Patrick Henningsen, Max Egan, Zen Gardner, Dr. Graham Downing, Willem Felderhoff, Field McConnell, Vanessa Beeley, Michael Shrimpton, Fiona Burns. 13th to the 15th of May 2016, Horwood House, near Milton Keynes. Book online at alternativeview.co.uk or call 0207 558 8869. AV7, bringing together some of the most inspirational agents of real change.
Honestly, I've spoken at a lot of gigs, and I'd say this is the best gig that I've spoken at, just because of the lineup of speakers.
and welcome back to part 2 of Fracking Nightmare. And we're talking live with Susan Gorman-Chang from Porter Ranch in Southern California, about 25 miles northwest of downtown Los Angeles. Now, Susan, we got a graphic here that I'm going to put up on screen, which looks at the order of magnitude of the methane that was recorded, in fact, during the gas leak. And I mean, obviously, those properties towards the north end, i.e. the back end of the estate, which back onto the hills, which house the gas storage facility, I mean, they were bearing the brunt, certainly at this time. I mean, those properties, I mean, now have a legacy, because the reality is, and I don't know exactly where you live in Porter Ranch, and I'm not going to ask that question, but those people who have the misfortune to live in that area which backs onto the hills, which up until this disaster would probably have been one of the most desirable parts of the subdivision, but now they're probably going to border on being unsaleable.
Yes, I would agree. It was, we first moved in here back in 91. You looked up in the hills, there were flocks of sheep that would keep the grass down. I mean, it was beautiful. It was like being in the country, but yet still being in the city of LA. And just the Porter Ranch zip code would generally give you a 20% bump on the value of your property. I mean, if your house was in Porter Ranch, you put the same house somewhere else. The fact that it was in Porter Ranch gave you a 20% bump on your property. Upwards. I don't know. After this, I don't know. Who knows?
Well, Steven Spielberg certainly liked the estate, didn't he? Because I think that's where he filmed some of the scenes of E.T.
Yes. Oh, exactly. They filmed that actually when this area was some of it was still being constructed. But the park just down the street from me is called E.T. Park, because that was the last scene where they're all in the park and everybody's coming together. And yeah, it was a beautiful area. There's horse trails, hiking trails, bobcats, coyotes, roadrunners. It's beautiful. Which makes it all the more tragic what's happened to it, that it's being destroyed.
Well, now you mentioned something there that is also very important. You said, and this was back in the film where people came together. Now I'm pretty sure that this disaster has brought the Porter Ranch community much closer together. Give us some insight into how the community as a whole is reacting to this.
Well, in the beginning, again, I don't think people knew how serious it was, but I think once the word got out, then people would come to Save Porter Ranch, which is the nonprofit group that started. They would come to the meetings, the forums. More and more people showed up to protests, to hold up signs, and people would honk as they went by in support. And now we have the local, the city councilman and the county assemblyman on our side. So it's been it was a sort of a tough climb to begin with, but now I feel like people are all on board. Maybe in the beginning I thought, I didn't think this was a big deal, but you know what? It is a big deal, and we really have come together. I've learned to get to know a lot of my neighbors, and it has brought the community together to fight this, which is a positive. I always try to look for positives in the situation, and that really is a positive. That it's also opened our eyes, especially me personally, that this is going on in other parts of LA as well. The Jefferson Drill documentary is very interesting. They're even closer to some drilling and fracking that's going on right in their area. And this is going on not just in Porter Ranch, but this is going on in different parts of California. And I moved here in 1983 from Indiana. And when I moved here, my impression of California was very progressive, very environmentally friendly, would do, really good things to clean up the air, clean up the environment. And over the years that I've been here, something's gone terribly wrong, because this never should have happened. And so, I want to turn that ship around, and I want to get people fired up about cleaning this up again. And again, not just Porter Ranch, because you clean up just Porter Ranch, what does that mean? We have the rest of the state, the rest of the people that are suffering through this, and really the rest of the world. I mean, we all sort of got to band together. I mean, Sierra Club has come to a lot of our events, and Stand LA. So we're Food and Water Watch. So I'm learning how, as a coalition, you're a lot stronger than just a little group up there in Porter Ranch, you know? And so we learn from each other and we gain strength from each other. And that in itself has been a very positive experience, I think.
And I mean, we'll come back to talking about the different groups in a second. But I mean, you're absolutely right. And I mean, you know, looking at this from a distance, I mean, it does seem that somewhere along the line, California went from literally being at the forefront of environmentalism, and maybe it coincided with a certain Austrian actor becoming the governor of the state. And I remember very clearly when California was looking at putting a budget together that would try and avoid it going into bankruptcy. And Arnold Schwarzenegger put his weight behind a very aggressive budget that would guarantee the state becoming bankrupt. And his intellectual response to the Senate about their rejection of the budget was, you know, what are you, a bunch of girly men?
Oh, yeah, I remember.
You remember that, you know?
Yeah.
But somewhere along the line, yeah, the corporations actually took control. And now what we have in California, and by the way, California certainly isn't unique in this, but California has a massive problem with the unconventional gas industry, i.e. fracking, not only because of the actual process itself, but also because of the abstraction of phenomenal amounts of water, which have run many natural reservoirs in Northern California dry. Then you have the wastewater, which was being re-injected, and that in itself was causing problems. And in fact, Oklahoma has become the earthquake capital of the US as a direct result of re-injection of frack waste. And then you have the other issue, which is because of the magnitude of the frack waste and the unconventional gas industry not having a solution for it, they have literally been using it to irrigate crops, and in some cases to irrigate organic crops.
Yes, yes. Ugh.
So, you know, the attack. I mean, I do another show on a Monday night here in Plymouth, and it's called Humanity versus Insanity. You know, primarily where we look at the outrageous attacks, primarily corporate driven, but the outrageous attacks on our environment and the legacy that we are potentially leaving future generations, well, not potentially, the legacy that we are leaving future generations actually doesn't bear thinking about. So, you know, maybe out of catastrophe comes something positive, because if it takes something of this order of magnitude to actually get people to become active, to participate in the process of trying to bring about the changes we all need to see, then it won't all have been in vain. But nonetheless, it's at a terrible cost, eh?
Yeah, it is. It is. It's sad that it's taken this to wake people up, but as long as we're all woken up, let's go with it. Let's wean ourselves off this ridiculous fossil fuel. Let's do, solar and wind, and again, shut that place down, because it's basically a big moneymaker where they can hold their assets and sell it to the highest bidder. And we're suffering for it.
Well, exactly. And the unconventional gas industry right now is in a whole world of hurt, because this is an industry that was built on a Ponzi scheme. In fact, I mean, let's just take a look at this, because I actually have some charts that I was going to show here. Let's look at the price of oil. Because, in the last 3 months, we have literally seen it go through this roller coaster, and literally from the middle of February through to the back end of March, we had a lot of people in the industry saying, oh, that's it, the slump is over, we're going back into boom mode. And then literally in the last 10 days or so, not even, the price has dumped back exactly as we predicted it would, back down to the mid $30 a barrel. But we look at the last 3 years, and the red line there across the center of the graph, that's the point at which the unconventional gas industry is not viable in the UK. That red line is significantly lower in the US. But nonetheless, at $36 a barrel, the vast majority of unconventional gas companies are going to struggle to generate sufficient income to even service the magnitude of their debt. And that's why they are going into Chapter 11 and then being bought up for cents on the dollar. But of course, nobody within those companies actually loses any money because they've all been paying themselves a salary. They're limited companies, so they're protected from this. But here's the real problem, and this is certainly a contributory factor, in my opinion, to the Porter Ranch disaster, because after the oil price crash of 2008, where it went from $147 a barrel in June, dropped to $35 a barrel by November. But then we had this gradual price rise up to certainly over $100 a barrel a couple of years ago, about $115 a barrel. And that was the shale boom. And this is where wells were being drilled in the US at a phenomenal rate. And in fact, over 1 million unconventional gas wells have been drilled in the US in the past decade and a half. And then, of course, from the middle of 2015, we start to have the tank, the price coming down, and here it is today from $115 a barrel down to $36 a barrel today. This is the bust. But now all of those wells that were drilled in the US, they're still producing. And consequently, the amount of gas and unconventional oil that is being produced now exceeds demand. And this is, I think, part of the problem. And you're not likely to hear too many truths probably from Southern California Gas, but the likelihood is that they were over-pressurizing the storage caverns because they hadn't got anywhere else to put the gas. So once the storage caverns became over-pressurized, then obviously that was putting stress on the outdated and much in need of significant maintenance, the underground safety devices in the well, which ultimately led to the blowout. Because as we've discussed before, Southern California Gas actually had been given the funding by the state to repair their subsurface blowout preventers, but they hadn't done the work. So this,
unbelievable,
from so many angles, was an absolute disaster waiting to happen. And right. Susan, what do we do to get this out on a wider basis? Because, I put into my search engine Porter Ranch radio show, and there's hardly anything. So apart from what is being published in the media, which is very little outside of the immediate vicinity, the word just isn't getting out. And yet it's acknowledged that this disaster is of an order of magnitude greater than the BP Deepwater Horizon.
Yeah, and that got a lot of coverage. I'm flummoxed, yeah.
So within the various groups, is there a team that is focused on trying to get the word out there? I mean, does Porter Ranch have its own website?
Yes, we took your advice. We do have a media team now, a social media team and also a conventional media team. We have a website, saveporterranch.com, a Facebook page. But yeah, sometimes when we call the media, we don't get much of a response. Like you would have thought they would have been all over the 2 homes that tested so high for benzene by UCLA that the residents were told not to go back home. After several days, we got maybe 1 interview. I mean, to me, that's like headline story. But it's just, and I don't know if they call, SoCal Gas and SoCal Gas says, oh, no, we did our own testing and everything's safe. I don't know if we're sort of being shut down at that level.
Or of course, Southern California Gas, I'm sure, has an advertising account with a lot of these outlets. And advertising revenue potentially at risk. And I mean, I know of situations in this country where editors have literally shut down the publication of articles, particularly in the local papers, because of the advertising revenue that comes from those companies.
Oh, wow.
So, once again, this is the corporate estate. So, it's why, I work on the basis that, the lamestream media, as I call them, really doesn't have too much of a role to play. We have to create our own media. We have to network. We may not reach many people individually, but if we reach, let's say, a few thousand, and then they reach, even a few hundred each, then it's the ripple effect, and it's spreading the word on that basis. It's almost, it's a question of having to perhaps, look for different ways to get information out rather than rely on the traditional paradigm of what we perceive to be the mainstream media.
Right, maybe posting things on social media, maybe posting this on some of our social media sites.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And the more people that do it, because even if somebody only reaches half a dozen people, that's half a dozen people that may not have known anything about it before. And I'll give you one example. 3 years ago, when I was doing a tour of the UK, trying to raise awareness of the impact of the unconventional gas industry, and the tour was called Fractured Future. And I had one particular event where there were only 7 people, and I was very disappointed because this was in a community that should, in theory, have been showing a lot more interest. But nonetheless, it was a very industrialized community, and a lot of people just said, well, it's just another industry. What's it going to matter? But of the 7 people that were there, 4 of them were instrumental in an event that occurred about 9 months later, which certainly did have a very significant impact on awareness in that particular part of the country. So, even if it's just a handful of people that you're reaching out to, you never know who's in that handful and, where they might take it.
Right. We're starting to get, a more critical mass of volunteers at this point, I think. We have a big forum coming up this Saturday at 3 o'clock, and we're going to bring in UCLA, who did some of the air testing, a toxicologist, Argo Scientific, who is doing some instrumental reporting in our backyard, and lots of stuff like that. So I think the more the public is educated about what's going on, and the more people show up and they tell their friends and their neighbors, we're starting to get kind of a critical mass, which is good.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, one other final observation I want to make while we're on this subject. What I'm bringing up on the screen now is a very simplistic graphic of the way in which the UK anti-fracking community isn't structured. And this is very, very important because, in fact, today, I think we have over 700 local community groups. And these local community groups are all completely independent and autonomous. And in fact, in some communities, there's more than one group. And because the community, and it's the same in Porter Ranch, it doesn't matter where people are, in terms of the social strata. It doesn't matter what their religious or philosophical beliefs. The common denominator here is that everyone in Porter Ranch is living in a contaminated environment. So regardless of their opinion on anything else, whether they're, absolute pro-Trump or, would defend Hillary to the ends of Benghazi, it doesn't matter where they stand, because we have, on situations like this, we have to put those differences to one side and focus on what it is that we agree on. And one of the benefits of having multiple independent, autonomous groups is it makes it much more difficult for the corporations to infiltrate, because I can absolutely guarantee you that if you have a singular Porter Ranch action group, for want of a better term, it will be infiltrated, because that's exactly the way the corporations work. If they had to pay somebody $250,000 from some East Coast agency to infiltrate the Porter Ranch community, to try to dilute or even simply glean information, then of course they would consider it to be money well spent. Whereas working on the principle of multiple small interest groups, who are networked, and whether it's something like Facebook or whatever, and we know all the shortcomings of Facebook, but nonetheless, if you know the shortcomings, you can at least work around them. But having multiple independent, autonomous community groups that are loosely networked and working towards the same objective, it makes it so much more difficult for the corporations or for any part of the establishment to infiltrate. And they will still, I'm sure, try to infiltrate, but nonetheless, obviously, you can quickly identify them by their behaviors.
So what kind of behaviors would that be?
Normally people who are looking to, disrupt meetings, or people, for example, are making suggestion about how to get the word out there. And these are the sort of people who say, no, you don't want to do that. Don't want to try that. We tried that somewhere else. That didn't work. The principle should be, unless there is a fundamental reason, i.e. it's illegal or somebody's going to get hurt, if somebody's got an idea, go with it. You might not, everybody in the room might not agree with it, but if somebody is motivated enough to take an initiative and it's their initiative, then run with it. And, we have a very basic principle amongst the UK anti-fracking community, because, we had to get away from people who would say, have you tried this or have you tried that? And our attitude is, if you think of something, it's your job. You've got the job. Go do it. Yeah. Don't pass the buck to somebody else.
Right. Don't tell us what we should be doing.
Exactly.
You have to help us. Yeah.
And that's, the attitude is, don't tell us what we should be doing. Tell us what you've done.
Yes.
And if you need some help to do it, then that's great. Then I'm sure we can provide the help in one way, shape or form. But it's your initiative and run with it. And so, we might not each individually agree with every type of initiative that's out there. But like I said, unless there is a fundamental reason why not, encourage it, nurture it. Nurture the self-empowerment, because this is something that the establishment and the corporations don't want. They don't want communities that are self-empowered. They want communities that they can manipulate by telling people, oh, don't worry, it's all safe. Nothing to worry about here. The well's plugged, etc., etc. This is something that, unfortunately, is going to be a legacy for a long, long time to come. Yep. And already what you're seeing, of course, is SoCal and the, I'm sure the California Senate doesn't want it to become an issue because it doesn't want it to be, a political hot potato. But it's not going to go away. The BP Deepwater Horizon disaster hasn't gone away. The people who live, on the coastline of right from Florida right round to Texas and even into Mexico, those people are going to be feeling the effects of that in one way, shape or form for many, many years to come. And of course, they're desperate to try and just push it under the rug and say, no, it's all history. Don't worry about it. It's done and dusted.
Right. Which is what SoCal Gas is trying to do. Well, we've plugged that leak. Everything's fine. Oh, if you smell gas, that's just a burp.
You got to love it. Yeah. Like I said, that probably cost SoCal close on $100,000 just to pay someone to come up with that explanation. Right, and you can pretty much guarantee that whatever comes out of SoCal's headquarters is effectively going to originate from some PR think tank somewhere as they try and literally mitigate the magnitude of their potential liability, just as BP did in the Gulf. Now, listen, if, like we've said before, out of disaster, can come something that is really beneficial. And if it pulls the community together, it unites the community, and it really does perhaps spread out into the wider area, into the LA suburbia, because it's not just going to be limited to Porter Ranch either. Eventually, people in the adjoining subdivisions are going to start to realize that, they're experiencing some of the same symptoms.
Right, and they have come forward, and they have come to our meetings and let the officials know it's not just a certain zip code. And so the relocation was actually the LA Department of Health made it a 5-mile radius. It didn't just go with the zip code, because gas doesn't know zip codes.
Yeah, exactly. And it doesn't adhere to legislation either.
No.
You know, and I mean, and this is the same with companies here. You know, in the EU, for example, there is legislation which stipulates that the companies that are fracking have to keep the fluids that they're pumping into the geology at enormous pressure. They have to keep them in the geology that is being targeted. Well, geology doesn't understand legislation. It'll do whatever it is it's going to do. And Go on.
Speaking of that, we're very concerned about methane migration.
Exactly.
Because with all the pressure that they put onto that well trying to plug it, we don't know where the methane's gone underground. We also have within neighborhoods right next door, old, quote, capped wells. And we don't know that they're truly capped. And we don't know that the methane isn't going to migrate and come up there. There's a whole mess of this methane migration, and no one seems to get a handle on it or to know who would regulate it.
Well, hold that thought, Susan. We're coming very much towards the end of the program tonight. But I want to take a second break, because in this break, I'm playing a short clip from the documentary that I produced and released almost exactly a year ago called Voices from the Gas Fields, which I recorded in southern Queensland. And this is Brian and David Monk, father and son, actually making their observation. They feel they were very much let down by the wider community, the wider Australian community, and they were sacrificed to the unconventional gas industry. And they have this to say about getting engaged in the process.
If at this point in time you can stand in front of a drill rig, then stop it from getting on. The easiest drill rig to stop's the first one. The hardest one will be the 10,000th. It'll be more than that though in the UK, because you're doing shale over there predominantly. Shale needs a lot of wells, leads a lot of destruction, poisons a lot of water.
If this gets the tiniest foothold, you're done. So it's now or it's never. Don't think that you've got that long, because it's now or never. So you do it now, you stand up now, and you find something within yourself that you didn't think was there. That's the important thing. You will be confronted by police. They wear their Kevlar suits, and it's a big intimidation thing.
Hey, you've got nobody in front of you. Keep walking. You're delaying this lady. Keep going. Don't push back on her. Keep moving. Now. If you've got to keep going. The officer will keep moving, please.
It's up to the people of the UK to get their cameras in the face of the Kevlar security, the Kevlar police, who are paid by the corporations. And we have to say no. That's all it is. But it's more than just saying no at a meeting. It's intent. It's the intent of no. It's the knowing that you mean no. That's when you will be unbelievably powerful. You come out in numbers. If they see your grandmother and the mother and the child come out and say, we are not going to accept this, then they are finished. But that's what it takes. Don't sit back and think that anybody's looking out for you. It's you.
Well, I think that's a very important message from Brian and David Monk, that basically, it's up to each and every one of us. Now, in the UK, we have the very good fortune at the moment to be in a situation where we have still only had one well drilled and fracked at high volume, high pressure in this country, despite the fact that the British government is doing everything it possibly can to push this industry upon unsuspecting communities. And on a previous episode of Fracking Nightmare, Susan, you were communicating with the residents of the Fylde Peninsula in the northwest of England, who are facing gas caverns, just like Porter Ranch, being established beneath their community. And so, unfortunately, we have to learn from the tragedy and experience of others. And yet, unfortunately, the corporations, of course, seem to be able to browbeat people and get them to believe that, well, don't worry, it'll never happen here because we have robust regulatory control. And
that's what they told us.
I'm sure that you have heard that. So, Susan, what's the next steps for the Porter Ranch community now?
So I think we're awaiting the Los Angeles County Health results from those 100 homes, both the swab tests and the air quality testing. I think we are definitely going to get hopefully 10,000 signatures of residents to shut that place down. And we really want Aliso Canyon shut down. And then we're going to be looking at going solar in the neighborhood as much as we can, pushing to make that a solar farm or community solar or just panels on our house. We have so much sunshine here. There's no reason why we shouldn't be able to do that. So I think we have a lot of work to do, and then being very vigilant. If we smell gas, or the Mercaptan actually, we call 1-800-CUT-SMOG, and we keep making that documentation from the AQMD, the Air Quality Management District, and be very vigilant and keep having protests and not letting them say it's just a burp, and just keeping the pressure on the elected officials, keep them accountable, and really we don't want to stop till we shut it down.
Excellent.
That's our plan.
Well, and the observation you made earlier about the migration is very important. And I mean, this is a major issue. It's a major issue in southern Queensland. In fact, in the documentary Voices from the Gas Fields and on Brian Monk's own YouTube channel, there is footage there of the gas literally migrating through the soil as the fracking process has created artificial fissures into adjoining geology, and the gas and the frac fluid, of course, does what it's designed to do, which is seek the path of least resistance. And the experience of the population of southern Queensland, which is a lot less dense than the population of Porter Ranch or any location in the UK.
Yeah,
well,
that's our fear. Could migrate under somebody's home. I mean,
exactly. Susan, this is an ongoing, obviously, saga, and I know this isn't the last conversation that we're going to have on Fracking Nightmare, or of course, via Skype. In the meantime, our thoughts, our hearts are with the Porter Ranch community, and if there is anything that you think we may be able to do from this side of the pond, please don't hesitate to ask, and we will certainly be monitoring progress as closely as we possibly can. So thank you so much for joining us.
Well, and thank you for continuing to report after all the other stations think it's all over because it's been plugged. So thank you for continuing.
That's the responsibility we have, and I think that the quote that I read earlier that Porter Ranch may not be as quite of the order of magnitude of Fukushima, but it's certainly a lot worse than the BP Deepwater Horizon disaster. So why is it getting a fraction of the coverage? Well, I had a lot of other material that I was planning to cover tonight, but this is fundamental. This is absolutely crucial. And if we don't listen to Susan's story, it could well soon be our story. There won't be any editions of Humanity vs. Insanity or Fracking Nightmare next week, so I will be back in 2 weeks' time. Thank you very much, and good night.